Today on the podcast review show, we're looking at Inside the Jewelry Trade.
Thicken up your skin and get ready for a supersized serving of opinion. Delivering constructive criticism and powerful praise, it's the podcast review show. This is the podcast that takes the guesswork out of first-time impressions. You'll discover new podcasts while learning podcasting tips. Join in on the conversation via voicemail, email, comments, and polls. It's all at our website, podcastreviewshow.com.
All right, welcome to the podcast review show. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me with what's left of his voice, the one, the only, Erik K. Johnson, better known as the podcast talent coach. How's it going, Erik?
It's going all right. Allergies are kicking in. It's that time of year, but I'm fighting through it. We'll see how long my voice can hold up during this show.
And today we are taking a look at a show from a marketing company. Maybe that's the name of the marketing company, 4Grainer. That might make sense. We're going to talk about that from people that aren't jewelers. There's a little confusion going on here. But it's a podcast about the jewelry industry for the jewelry industry. And unfortunately, our guest could not make it tonight. But this has been plagued. This if you ever want to do a show with interviews, that's the hardest part, is getting people's schedules to sync up. But,
especially when there's three of us.
Yeah, and Rod was nice enough to go, carry on, my brothers. I would love to hear what you have to say. And so we're going to go ahead. What we always do is we start off by playing like the first couple minutes. I think I have like the first 3.5 minutes just to get a taste of the show. Well, we'll talk about what we think about it when on the other side of that. But here is, this was an episode about a trade show.
We should probably set it up. Rod was going to be on the show. He had something come up last minute, but he had recorded a handful of episodes in the middle of last year and then kind of pulled back and said, all right, I'm looking to retool it. We're going to relaunch the whole podcast. Hope to do that in May. So looking for a little feedback on what I might change when we go for the relaunch to really blow this thing up. So that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. Is we're going to take a look at a episode from a few months back, episode number 9, kind of give Rod some feedback on what we think about this particular episode, and hopefully give him a few pointers to where he can relaunch this podcast to bigger and better things come May.
And it goes a little something like this.
Power up your profit. And have a store chock full of customers. You're about to discover the no-nonsense secrets to making jewelers more successful. This is Inside the Jewelry Trade with Rod Worley.
Hello and welcome to Inside the Jewelry Trade radio show. I'm your host, Rod Worley, and this is the radio show devoted to jewelry store owners, the jewelry trade, and those who want to get a rare glimpse behind the curtain into the $70 billion a year U.S. jewelry and watch industry. We give you access to jewelry designers, vendors, successful store owners, and those who have the proven expertise you need to move your jewelry business forward right now. The bottom line, this online radio show is for those in the jewelry trade who expect more from their business and want to cut through the clutter to find out what really works. Welcome to episode number 9 of Inside the Jewelry Trade radio show. This episode is going to be different in many ways. It isn't one of the usual one-on-one interview styles that we're known for. In fact, this one is more of a collection of thoughts, expressions, and feelings of those in the trade who attended the JA New York Summer Show this year. So as not to give too much away, let me have Michelle Graff, Editor-in-Chief of National Jeweler, explain it.
As you're about to hear, this episode of Inside the Jewelry Trade is a bit of a departure from the first several episodes. It was recorded by yours truly at the recent JA New York Summer Show, which took place at the end of July at the Javits Center. Instead of featuring one guest for the entire episode, we recorded short bits from different members of the industry who happened by National Jeweler's booth at the show. Retailers, exhibitors, and marketers, quite willingly, shared their thoughts on a variety of topics. Their best moment behind the bridal counter, their expectations for the holiday season, their proudest career accomplishment, and their favorite part of coming to New York City for the show. We want to extend a warm thank you to all those who were interviewed for their time, and we hope you enjoy.
Before we start the show, I just want to take a moment to say thank you from all of us at 4Grainer and Inside the Jewelry Trade to both National Jeweler and especially Michelle Graff for taking the time to bring this unique opportunity to all of us in the jewelry trade. For me personally, this is a real treat because who in broadcasting hasn't secretly wanted to say this famous tagline? Live from New York, it's the J.A. Summer Show. Ah, yes, it's the hum of a busy jewelry trade show like the J.A. New York Summer Show that instantly brings back memories for me. Reconnecting with friends and colleagues, seeing the latest exciting jewelry designs from the hottest new designers, sitting alongside the new collections from designers who are household names. You know, as Michelle mentioned at the top of the show, National Jeweler literally gave vendors and jewelers a voice at the show. She did this by writing an article for National Jeweler titled, Making Your Podcast Debut at J.A. New York Summer Show 2014. And those in the jewelry trade certainly responded. The big question for most people who haven't attended the show before would be, well, honestly, what's the show like? And who better to answer that question than those who put this show at the top of their list every year? To answer that question, let's start off by getting the views of Hedda Schupak, who is the editor of The Centurion, a popular weekly e-newsletter and webzine for the trade. For Hedda and many others, the J.A. New York show is all about being the right size.
What is my favorite part of coming to New York City for the J.A. New York show? I think it's just having a chance to finish everything I didn't get time to do in Vegas. It's calmer, it's quieter, and for me, I don't have to get on a plane to get there, so I really like that. And it's good to catch up with people and have some time to talk.
And so there's one clip of many that they played throughout the show. And so I guess I'll start off. I really like the intro. It just, you can see throughout the whole podcast that this is not somebody using their phone in a, you know what I mean? There's somebody who's taking this seriously. And I like the intro, like the music, like the energy, the fact that they say what to expect, and I'm going to hold them to this, right? This is where you learn what really works in the industry. And so I definitely like that, and I like the not taking it so seriously, the whole little line there, but live from New York, right? I thought, okay, cool, this is somebody who's taking it seriously, and I think that's one of my favorite podcasts. People that take the topic serious, but they don't take themselves too seriously. I think that's one of my favorites. Eric, what did you think?
I liked the intro. I thought it was a little long and clunky. The voiceover at the very beginning is about 15 to 17 seconds, kind of setting up the show, and then Rod comes in, and Rod takes another 45 seconds to set up the show again. And I thought there were a lot of promises made in the intro itself that really became confusing to understand the one thing I was going to get out of the show. Because in Rod's section, he talks about how the show's devoted to jewelry store owners. The show's going to give you access to designers and vendors and owners and expertise that you wouldn't get anywhere else, and to help those jewelry store owners who really want to move forward and increase their revenue and their sales. And it's devoted to those in the trade that are really looking to cut through the clutter and find what really works. And I thought there are a lot of promises made there. We might be able to fine-tune that and cut it in half, go from 45 seconds worth of promises made to give me 20 seconds of the real meat of what the show is all about. What's the gist of the show? What's the one thing I'm going to get and walk away? Is it how to move my business forward? Great. Then there's a lot of ways to do that, giving me access to designers and vendors and owners and expertise and things like that. But if the one thing is we're going to help you move your business forward, then that's the thing we want to drive home in the intro itself. And a lot of the show is scripted because it's put together very NPR style. And I think at the beginning it feels to me like Rod's reading the introduction, and even though he's reading a lot of the script throughout the show, he gets a little looser later on in the show and really becomes more comfortable in between the segments. But the introduction itself, I thought it was a bit long. When we listen to the conclusion of the show, it's brief, it's to the point, it's exactly what we want to hit, and it gets right out of it. I thought the production value and the energy value of the intro was good. I just thought we could have trimmed it down a bit.
When you think about it, this might be a time where if you're going to make me sit through that intro, give me a little teaser at the beginning of it to say on today's show, we're going to blah, 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 then make me sit through the intro with and we'll give you this and we'll give you that. And so that way, at least I know what's coming. It's like you said, if you got to sit there and wait for it to, and then it's like you said, and it's funny you brought that up because I think that's one of the things that, as I listen to the show, my expectations, right, because they promise so much, about halfway through I'm kind of like, this isn't what I thought it was going to get. And now they did set it up, and we heard at the beginning, this isn't your typical show, which I thought was kind of interesting that they said, this is the one we want you to review, because I'm like, well, if this is, okay. So that was a little different, but the content didn't match what the intro said.
Yeah, and it's not your typical show. I kind of had a little issue with that too, because it's only episode number 9, and when you're this young in your podcasting career, people are coming into the show all the time, brand new listeners, especially to episode number 9, episode 10, 12, 15. Your brand new listeners are coming in, just discovering the show, and then deciding whether to go back and listen to the original podcasts or the first few episodes. So we're only 9 into it. How do we know what a typical episode is going to be? You know, your podcast ebbs and flows as you develop it and design it coming out of the gate, and what happens in the first 5 episodes may not be what's happening in episode 50 through 60. It might be something completely different. So you know, this was our first episode, so understanding what we're going to get and knowing that it's not what we typically get, maybe this wasn't the episode we should be listening to. But I love the way it was put together. It's very NPR style. I could tell it took a lot of work to get it put together. His actualities were amazing, and a lot of great interviews included.
Yeah, one of the, you know, we always talk about stories and things of that nature, and so they basically, you know, Rod would kind of set it up and have like a brief introduction as to what was going on, and really, you know, according to the show notes, they asked people, you know, what's your favorite repair question? What's your favorite moment behind the bridal counter? What are your expectations for this coming holiday season? You know, and they kind of went through all that, and they also mentioned like just almost like, you know, one of those I don't want to say a Spinal Tap moment, but apparently in the jewelry business there's like a little nudge poke to when it comes to changing watch batteries.
Yeah.
And so I found this story, and it made me kind of giggle, and it was one of those like, yeah, okay, this is inside trade kind of talk, so it's a cute little story, so I thought I would bring this along.
You would be hard-pressed to get a group of jewelers together and not come away with a gem of a story if you asked them one simple question. Give us your best jewelry repair story. I think every jeweler has their favorite. After 30 years on the front lines, I know I certainly do. That's why this next story brings a smile to my face, because most jewelers have a similar story tucked away. We're just glad Jim Alprin, owner of Jim Alprin Jewelers in Ohio, shared his.
What is your favorite repair question? It's not really a question, but it did happen in the store, and it was sort of a fun time that absolutely ruined my life, because I always complain that people come to our store for watch batteries, and if you give them a watch battery, the next thing they do is they come back to you again next year for another watch battery, or with a new watch that they just purchased and need the links shortened. So one day a lady came into our store about a month ago and had 3 watches, and she wanted all 3 watches to have batteries put in them while she waited. So I begrudgingly took the watches and went to the back where I do all of our watch batteries, and while I'm putting in the 3 batteries, unbeknownst to me, my sales clerk, if you will, is showing her rings, and suddenly she comes back to where I'm putting the batteries in the watches and says, "Jim, will you come out and speak to this customer? She's looking at this ring." And I went out and spoke to the customer, and after a few moments she said, "I'll take it." The ring was $38,000, which originally my whole theory is that watch battery repair and small repairs do nothing but bring other repairs into the store. But there is the rare occasion when this happens. Now, to make things worse, the lady came back last week and spent another $12,000 on a pair of 2-carat stud earrings because she had such a good experience the first time. There you go.
So I laughed when I heard this because there's a really expensive jewelry place right across from my my building here, and the only thing I've ever done there is to replace my watch battery. So I now know I'm one of those watch battery guys.
They see you coming. The thing I loved, and we could park here for quite a while. I wish Rod was on the show because it almost feels to me like Rod's got some broadcasting background. His show, and I don't know if he did it on purpose, if he was conscious of it, but his entire show has an amazing story arc to it. And that was one thing I was listening for when I heard him start into this actuality-rich podcast. Was the podcast going to lead somewhere, or was it just going to be a hodgepodge collection of audio drops from the show? And I thought he did an amazing job really putting the show together with a great story arc. The beginning of the show kind of starts off with what people are looking forward to most about the show, why they're so excited to be in New York for the show this particular year, and some of the great things they hope to achieve and accomplish while they're at the show, running into great friends they haven't seen, finding new ideas at the vendor booths and that sort of thing. Then it kind of got into what they like most about the show, what they do elsewhere around New York while they're in town for the show, and it kind of built through that. Then we got to some personal stories like the one we just heard with various jewelers. And then we got into some forecasting and the outlook of the holiday season that was coming up. And then it wrapped up with the conclusion of the show and the things that everybody loved about it and a recap of the awards they did. I thought the entire episode really followed a nice storyline, and that's not easy to do with a show like this.
Yeah, the other thing, from a technical aspect, holy cow, as somebody who's done a clip show, they're not a lot of fun. And to get the fact that I didn't have to adjust my volume anytime, and there wasn't, and then you have people, this was recorded at a booth in a trade show. The fact that you don't have a bunch of popping peas going on, I mean, this could have been a technical nightmare. And that was one thing that I was like, you know what? Okay, this is, again, some time went into this episode to put it together. And I didn't even notice that. That's why you're the podcast talent coach, my man. That whole story arc thing. See, I didn't even think about that. I'm too busy looking at the WAV file to go, yep, he's good. He's between -3 and -6. Right.
Yeah. The one thing that intrigued me was at the very beginning, Michelle Graff kind of introduces the show, and then you don't hear Michelle at all through the rest of the episode, which I thought was kind of odd. But at the very end of the episode, you find out that it was Michelle that did most of the interviews, and then it was Rod that kind of was the moderator, the MC that put it all together. I would have kind of liked to hear Michelle interact a little bit more in the show. And I'm not sure if she's a regular part of the show or if she just happened to be part of this particular episode because she's at the JA show in New York. But I kind of found that interesting that she helped set the show up at the beginning, and then you don't hear her again. She gets some accolades at the end for all of the work she did to help put the show together. I would have liked to have heard a little more of her.
Yeah, the one thing, as I was listening to it, and I listened to it a couple times, that to me I went, it's just ever so slightly grazing. My reaction was, I'm being sold to. This is, it's like, and I've got a clip here, and just the way it's kind of set up.
Is there a better backdrop for a prestigious jewelry show than the Big Apple?
Isn't that kind of like, can you, well, let me tell you, and if you order now, we'll throw in. But I'll go ahead and play this.
Is there a better backdrop for a prestigious jewelry show than the Big Apple? Not only is the show great, but New York offers visitors so much more. Did we mention the world-class restaurants? Here's what Patricia Severud, founder of the jewelry expertise services company called Joya Consulting, had to say.
My favorite part of coming to New York for the JA show is to go to all the fabulous New York restaurants. You eat fantastically here, and we went on the North River lobster boat last night. We had dinner on the North River. It was so much fun. And the events. I love the events. The WJA event is not to be missed. Got to get here.
So when she said gotta get here, I went, okay, number one, you're selling New York City? Do we really need to sell New York City? Okay. And then when she's like, you got to get here, I was like, okay, now you're kind of nudging me. You're pushing me to come. And I just went, okay. And that's when I went, that's when I kind of went, this is a commercial for the trade show. And I just kind of went, all right, well, that's what it is. And that's when I kind of went, that's what I thought back to the beginning of the show. And I went, this is not what I thought I was going to get. And that's where I started to kind of lose, like, all right, here's somebody else. And, I was like, all right, And that's when I heard the little ring story that I was like, well, that's kind of funny. That's kind of cute. But in terms of, here's what really works, apparently what really works is going to the trade show.
Well, see, and I didn't get that feeling. I kind of stepped back and put myself in the shoes. If I was a jeweler and had never been to the show, would it make me want to go? And so I kind of looked at it. If I was looking at or listening to a show like this regarding New Media Expo, and I had never been, and I heard people like this, podcasters, talking about the great people that they met, the panels that they attended, some of the vendor booths that they'd seen, the great activities and restaurants around Las Vegas and things like that, would I be jazzed and really wanting to go, or would I felt like somebody was just trying to sell me New Media Expo? And putting myself in a jeweler's shoes, I thought, you know what, it's telling me the benefits I would get by attending this JA show, and what I'm going to find in the booths and running into old friends and learning new things and discovering new designs and just sharing war stories that we all have in whatever industry we happen to be in. Yeah, sure, it's he'd make a great pitch guy for the Visitors Bureau. But I felt there was some content in the show that was beneficial and could help a jeweler move their business forward. And why is it worth dropping the cash to go to New York City for the show?
Right. That was the flip side of my comment. I thought, on the other hand, if I've never been to that show, number one, just the sound of it sounded like I was there because it was recorded at a booth. So that I like that kind of sound, seeing, wow, I feel like I'm there kind of effect. And it does. It lets you know, okay, here's what to it. Because when I was listening to it, I'm like, I should do one of these for the New Media Expo, because it's a great way to sell the show. And so I can see why they did it. It was just kind of, again, with all those promises at the beginning, I'm like, okay. But again, they did a disclaimer and say this is a different kind of show.
I would agree, yeah. It kind of made me flash back to when you guys did the Podcasters Roundtable at New Media Expo last year, where you had the three of you just sitting around a table and shooting the gip, and everybody was swinging by and jumping on the mic with you and just talking about the show and the things they loved and everything they were learning. And it turned out to be a great episode of Podcasters Roundtable, but was kind of a pitch for New Media Expo as well.
Yeah. And I think that's it. It's for me, sometimes it's hard to really get in the shoes of the target listener, and that may be the case. That if I was a jeweler, I'd be like, oh, this is awesome. I love that show. Or I was there 2 years ago. I should have gone this year, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest part about doing this show is we have to jump into the shoes of the target audience, and it's the very first episode of this show we've ever listened to. And so we kind of have to hit the ground running and be somebody we're not. So, And then Rod's not here to defend himself.
to fill in the gaps. So we'll go over and take a look at his website, and the thing I liked about it, it's clean. It's really nothing too distracting on a big giant button at the front. Inside the Jewelry Trade Radio. I like the fact that at the bottom of his page, he talks about signing up for their audio newsletter. and which I'm pretty sure is just the podcast. But this might be again where Rod knows his audience, and maybe they're not the most technical. Maybe they're not up on podcasting yet. But there was I remember seeing it somewhere where you could sign up for their audio radio. The one thing that I saw that I'm like, it's not a big thing, but it can, the idea of your show title, it's the headline of your show. If this was a newspaper, it's your headline. And what you're putting on the beginning of your show is ITJT, which is inside the jewelry trade. So we get that, 009. Well, in iTunes, you don't get much real estate to show your show title. Now, you get tons of room here on your website, but you're trying to get people to your website probably through iTunes. And so I always tell people, if you had Paul McCartney on your show, it might say ITJT 009 Paul, and nobody's going to see that it was Paul McCartney because you took up, 7 to 10 characters, and you might only get 20, maybe 30 tops in iTunes to show that. And I always say, if you're going to do that, put it at the end, because that first part of your title is something that is just, we're talking prime real estate. And so I understand people like to do that. So if people search on their website and they say, go find episode 9, you could do that, and you definitely want that there. But that was the one big thing that I just went, oh, it's a pet peeve of mine, but I think I have merit for, here's a way that you can, get more people to click, because if I've never listened to your show before, I don't know what ITJT009 is, and I might have to think about it a second to figure it out. I did like the fact that once I clicked on the big button for the radio, and even on his front page, he has players everywhere. It makes it super easy to click on play. You don't have to search for those. And he's got a pretty extensive show notes for this episode, and he talks about all the questions that they asked. He's got links to a lot of the things they discussed about. They talk about how this kind of came about and how it was recorded in a booth. And so his show notes, I was like, wow, here's a guy who's not typing 3 sentences and going, oh, that's good enough. So
on this particular episode in his show notes, I love the fact that he has like a mini bio of everybody that he talked to at that show. And the font is nice and big. It's easy to read. There's a lot of white space, so it doesn't feel like I get fatigued trying to read it off of a screen. A lot of great photos and pictures included throughout the website. I pulled it up on my iPhone. It's very mobile friendly as well. I think it's very clean. He doesn't have a ton of drop-down menus. It's easy to navigate, and it doesn't get too cute and too cool for the room with the titles of the drop-down menus. It's in the news and article archives and about us. It's really easy to find your way around it, and I thought his website looked solid.
Yeah,
the very front page, the home page, was kind of interesting.
Let's talk about that.
It's a digital marketing for jewelers by jewelers, and that's what 4Grainer, the company, is about. And then Inside the Jewelry Trade is the podcast itself, the Inside the Jewelry Trade radio show. But on the front page, okay, we're for jewelers by jewelers, passion, jewelry, success. But a lot of the photos that we use, what we do is IndyCar, brand development is an IndyCar, local SEO services is an IndyCar, marketing research, some IndyCar guys talking to each other. And then we get down to the digital magazine series, and we have a lady reading her iPad, and then another lady reading her notebook, and another couple reading in their notebook, and then another couple kind of discussing over coffee, and another couple reading their notebook computer. And so I was kind of confused why we started with the whole IndyCar theme, and then all of a sudden we're down into, now we're into iPads and notebook computers. So
yeah,
I'm not sure where we were going there.
Yeah, that was, and really it wasn't until we started getting ready for this episode that I went, oh, you know what, the company, because their website is 4Grainer, that's GRAINER.com. That's the name of the company, because at first I thought that was the name of the podcast. No, the podcast is Inside the Jewelry Trade. And yeah, if you go to the very front page, before you scroll down, all you see is IndyCar stuff and a button for the podcast. And let me click on read more here.
And I'm not really sure what four-grainer means. Now, there are four pieces to their company as attract, engage, convert, and retain, and maybe those are the 4 grains of success. I don't know. And that's, I wish Rod was here so we could ask him what that means, and maybe that's a jewelry industry term too that we're not aware of, but a little confusing there. And the other thing I found interesting about the homepage is there's no pictures of any jewelry.
That was the one thing I was like, I expected to see. Maybe that's cliche to have pictures of diamonds, and I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that for a jewelry site there isn't any.
Yeah.
I think when you go to about the essence of 4-grainer here, yeah, there's a woman with a bunch of jewelry on. I went, okay, now we're talking. But when at the I will say I did find Rod's bio at the bottom here. It says he's the president of 4-grainer. He's a jewelry business strategist and host of course Inside the Jewelry Trade. He brings 30 years of retail jewelry success and leadership to the table at the single and multi-unit guild level. He's a freelance writer, guest lecturer, and member of the prestigious Writers Center. He lives in Atlanta with his wife and 2 almost human cats. So again, I love the fact he doesn't take himself too serious. So,
yeah.
Over and all, I've seen a lot worse websites. I didn't see anything besides the title that I went, ooh, that's that is an easy fix. It's like you said, it's a lot of white space. Everything's very easy, and like you said, they have a lot of drop downs, but you don't find yourself clicking on stuff going, I wonder what this is. Everything's really clearly named. When I looked at the audio file, his ID3 tags are fine. His recording, like I said, his recording levels could have been all over the place very easily, and I thought he did a nice job of making sure everybody sounded good, and overall a good job from the technical side. The only thing I just thought about it when I go to contact us. Yep. Okay. He's got his hours. Do we have? Yeah. Okay. We have a form. I was going to say because at first I'm like, oh, we don't have an email address. So you always want to make it easy to. Obviously, a marketing company, they're going to make it easy to contact you. So,
one of the questions that Rod had when he first reached out to us about reviewing his show was his audio quality. He was concerned. He wanted to make sure his audio quality was the best it could be, and I didn't hear anything wrong with his audio quality. I thought the compressor limiter was kicking in, and all of the soft spots were bumped up. All of the peaks were squished down a little bit. There wasn't any white hiss in the background when he was intermingled amongst the actualities. I thought the actualities were surprisingly clean for recording it in the middle of a trade show. Overall, I thought the audio quality was strong.
Yeah, the first time I listened to this was in the car, and I'm listening to it, enjoying it, and it wasn't really till now where I'm in a quiet room with headphones on that I even noticed he had a noise gate. At the beginning of the show, I think it was might have been Michelle, somebody interviewed, had an ever so slight, and again, this is with me sitting here doing this, an ever so slight hum that I really probably wouldn't have noticed, except he gated it. So when she quit talking, it would go away. Yeah. So that's always the catch-22. On one hand, you got rid of it, but on the other hand, you when you're in a quiet room. But like I said, when I listened to I had no idea. It sounded fine. And it wasn't until here that I went, oh, you know what? He's using the gate. But I think the average Joe Schmo listener wouldn't pick that up.
I didn't pick it up because I was listening in the car, so I did not hear that. I was not listening in headphones. One pro trick that I'd like to recommend for anybody doing a show like this with actualities interspersed amongst a storyline is to let your pieces overlap the actuality a little bit, almost like a little B-roll at the beginning of the actuality. So the din of the conference kind of creeps in underneath you as you're introducing the bit. It kind of keeps the forward momentum of the show going, and it kind of tells the audience, here comes an actuality. So it's not you, stop, actuality, stop, you, stop, actuality, stop. You kind of overlay them a little bit. So you kind of walk on top of it as it starts, and then you kind of walk on top of it as it ends. And it keeps that forward momentum going throughout the show. Just a little trick of the trade that a lot of editors use.
That's funny you said that, because I had that in my notes. That I was going to say, am I being nitpicky? But if they had moved the clip up like a half a second to where the minute he stopped, because there were times he would say blah 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 and yada 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 and go.
And then you would hear like 3 seconds of background noise, and then the guest would start talking.
Yeah, and I always thought if they just moved that, I really like your idea of overlapping them, but I just remember there were times it was like, and here's so-and-so, and he'd say their credentials, and then there was like a wait. And I'm like, if it was just, to me, it was like just a half a second quicker. It's like you said, it keeps the momentum going. It's kind of a not that start-stop kind of thing.
The other reason that led me to believe he might have a broadcasting background is when Rod would introduce the next person to speak, he didn't always do it the exact same way. He didn't always say, and here's what Dave had to say, and here's what Beth had to say, and here's what Jane had to say. He always had a different way to walk into that. Like the actuality that you played with the gentleman had the battery story. He said, and we were really glad that Bob shared his story, and it rolled into it. And then he was talking to the lady about eating out in New York, and here's what she had to say. And it was always something a little different. It wasn't cliche, and it didn't become stale and monotonous walking into each actuality. Very, very professional and very well done.
When he's got the pipes, that's the other thing. When I first heard it, I'm like going, oh, here's a guy who's got radio background.
He sounds great.
Yeah. All right, well, speaking of sounding great, you mentioned this earlier, the ending of his show. I went back and kind of listened, and he did mention the awards and kind of thank those people that helped. But his final ending of the show was very short and to the point.
This has been Inside the Jewelry Trade with Rod Worley.
Proven advice for jewelry store owners that's as good as money in the bank.
See 4grainer.com for more tested strategies on getting more customers through your door and more cash in your pocket.
Yeah, that's it. And this is kind of I don't know if it's a trend, but it's definitely a strategy that people are doing. We've talked about, instead of sending people, subscribe to me on iTunes, follow me on Twitter, Instagram me, pin me, whatever, it's just go to my website. And that's basically what he's doing here. For more information, 4grainer.com. And I went, okay, that's simple, to the point. And then when you get there, make sure it's easy to subscribe to the podcast or whatever it is you want people to do when you get there that you've made a podcast for.
About 30 seconds before that, after he's done thanking everybody that helped put this thing together and all the people that appeared on it, he makes one very interesting call to action. He says, if you enjoyed this particular episode, share the love, basically. And I figured he was going to say go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review like everybody does. But instead he says make a donation to this children's charity. And he gave the location of where to go. And that was his only call to action. And I thought, well, that was pretty cool. Kind of surprising, out of left field. Not what I expected. I expected the same rote closure that everybody gives. Go sign up for my website, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, email me your firstborn child, everything like that. And it's it's the same stuff everybody gives. And he didn't. He took a left turn. And I loved it. It was great. Yeah. I was like, wow, that was memorable. It was unique. It was something that made him stand out. And I absolutely love that part of the show.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. I'm listening to a book now about word-of-mouth marketing. And one of the things they said, it's one of those books, you ever get through a book and about 3/4 of the way through, you're like, I got to finish this book so I can say I finished it. But you're already kind of done with the book. But the one thing I'm pulling away from it is it's an easy criteria. What part of the show is the audience going to tell their friends about?
Yeah.
That's a really easy way to just boil it down. And, when I heard that, I'm with you. When I heard it, I'm like, hey, that was kind of cool. Wow, he's got a charity going. That's kind of like, well, that's cool, because one would assume that jewelers have cash. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I'm assuming. And,
when you're selling a $38,000 ring, I bet you do.
You would think maybe just a pinch. And I'm like, it's kind of cool that they're giving back. So that would be something, again, that you might go, yeah, there's a podcast I listen to, and the guy's got a charity going. So, but I guess we should kind of, to wrap her up a little bit, it's kind of a bummer that Rod's not here, but I'm sure we'll get some feedback and do a little back and forth behind the scenes here. But we want to thank Rod for, submitting his podcast and to be reviewed. And, in general, I think he said, it's like he said, he was a little worried about the audio. And I'm with you. I'm like, man, I thought it sounded good. It was definitely. I want to ask him, like, did you do this? I would bet money the intro and the outro, they reek of music radio creative. I think I recognize the voices. But even the middle of that was all somebody put that together. It was Rod. He did a great job of again making sure the audio was there. I love the fact that they didn't squash the atmosphere. So many people would try to noise gate that out. It's like, no, that's the part I liked. I felt like I was right there on the floor with them.
Yeah,
so
I love that part of it.
Yeah. And then in terms of, so that would be my thumbs up. I thought the website was good. It's simple. It's right to the point. It's super easy. A little confused. It took me a while to figure out that 4Grainer was the name of the company. A little confused on the NASCAR stuff or whatever that is, Formula One. NASCAR people are going to go, what do you mean it's Junior's not there? It's Formula One. But I like the fact that it was easy to pick any lesson and listen to it. You've got all the buttons there to subscribe in Stitcher and iTunes. And I know I saw it somewhere where you could sign up for their audio newsletter. I thought that was a cool spin.
Yeah, it's about halfway down you get to the regular newsletter. And then if you go almost all the way to the bottom of the homepage, am I on the homepage or am I on the episode page? Homepage, all the way to the bottom, and then right before his black footer there, it says sign up now, 15-minute monthly audio newsletter. So he's got a written newsletter and a monthly audio newsletter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and then for me, in terms of stuff that I would, maybe change, like I said, the titles, that's a pet peeve of mine, but I think you will. You just want to make it easy. You want to grab people's attention, and nobody's looking for episode 6. And when you abbreviate it, you got to remember there are a lot of new people, and they may not put together, the IJ, TJ, whatever TJ Maxx, J, whatever the abbreviation was. They may not put that 2 and 2 together because they haven't listened to your show yet to figure out that that's that. So I would move that at the end, I'm with you. Now that I've thought about it, I've listened to the episode again. I almost want to go back and listen to another one of his, quote, regular episodes.
Yeah, so if we're looking at some suggestions for Rod as he's relaunching the podcast, what is it going to be moving forward? Are we going to do standard interview show? And how is that going to be structured? Is it just going to be the interview alone? Is it going to have some jewelry news in there? Are we going to have some actionable steps for these jewelers to move their business forward? I'm not really sure where he goes from here to relaunch the podcast. He wants to do a podcast every other week from what his email said. If he can find a way to do it every week, maybe do a shorter podcast and do it every week to create some consistency and get people coming each week. It's kind of hard to remember to come every other week to hear a new episode, unless you have a strong mailing list and you can email people and let them know new episodes are available. I would recommend trying to make it every week, and maybe it's not an interview every week. Maybe it's an interview every other week and then jewelry news every other week or something like that. But I'm just interested in where he wants to take it in this relaunch. I loved this particular episode and the way it was put together with all of the actualities. I know how long it takes to create an episode like this. Doing an episode like this every week that's going to be very, very time consuming. I mean, NPR does shows like this, and that's their full-time gig. So
and they have a staff of 12.
Yeah, exactly. They're not the ones sitting in the booth editing it all day long. So I don't know where Rod goes from here.
I know he has a note here in the original email he sent. He was talking about putting together a 4Grainer network. how do you put one together? Well, number one, you have to have multiple shows, and that's actually one of the kiss. Is that what is the plural of kiss? It's the kiss of death. So many people I see want to start off with 3 shows. I'm like, let's do one well, and when you figure out how much time it takes, then launch a second and a third, and you can use that first show to promote the second and the third later. But to start off with 3, a lot of times that's so overwhelming that you get to episode 3 and just die because you kind of overstepped your bounds maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I think creating a network is really in the eye of the beholder. It's what do you want your network to be? Are they going to be like-minded shows produced by different hosts that come together to cross-promote each other? Are they going to be different topics by the same host, and you're creating your own network? I think the idea of a network sounds great, but in the end, what's your ultimate goal? What do you hope the network does for your show? And if it's cross-promoting, it almost makes more sense to have multiple hosts doing multiple shows cross-promoting each other on a particular network. But you have to ask yourself, it's a lot of work to coordinate that network. What is it going to do for you in the end?
Yeah, I always use the time of a 4-to-1 ratio. So if you're going to do a 15-minute podcast, plan on spending an hour. And so many people say, I want to do an hour-long show. There's really nothing wrong with doing a shorter show. Obviously, the longer, the more valuable the content, the deeper the connection you're going to have with your audience. But in terms of technical issues, I actually just changed one of my websites into a network. If you go to powerofpodcasting.com, you'll see all my podcasting-related shows, including this one. And in terms of cost, you're looking at a website's $10 a month. It's nothing big deal, and I'm looking into ways I can have that automated, so when I update, the School of Podcasting or anything like that, it will update that website as well. So technical-wise and money-wise, it's not really any big deal. It's just going to be a little more time to keep it updated and things of that nature. And I'm looking to update that, but all I'm doing it for is cross-promotion. So if somebody says, "Where's your show?" I can give them one one website, and they can pick any of those shows, and I end up with a listener on something, and I could see maybe doing that. But I would, Eric's got a great point. Where do you want to go? Pick where you want to go, and then ask yourself, do I need multiple shows to do that? Do you just want to do maybe a jewelry news show, and then one about marketing, and then one, or do you just want to have one show with all of that? And the best person to answer that is throw up a survey on your website and ask your audience, hey, I'm thinking of relaunching the show. What did you like about it? What did you wish we hadn't, or we had covered that we didn't? Or when in doubt, ask your audience. They're the best people that can answer that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but he's definitely got the chops, and he's got the experience, obviously. So and in a way, this episode was a great kind of business card for his company, because now other jewelers might say, wow, this podcasting thing's pretty cool. Because you think about it, every single one of those people that talked on this podcast, they came over to listen to it.
Yeah.
So as a marketing card, I was like, oh, that's a brilliant move. And so from that aspect is a great way to promote his company. I was like, wow, that's actually kind of brilliant, because now he's introduced those jewelers to the magic of podcasting.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was a great show. I love the actualities. I love how it was put together. I love the story arc of it. I'd trim down the intro a little bit more, make me one big promise, and then let's get to delivering it. I love the brief closing of the show. The website looks great in terms of readability, the fonts, the white space. Might have a little more jewelry on there and just kind of tell me what it is that you do. Overall, I thought it's a solid show. I thought the audio quality was great. It would just be interesting to see where Rod goes from here to relaunch this thing.
And we'll probably have an update on next week's show, because between now and then we'll probably get some feedback to Rod, and maybe you can fill in some of those gaps for us. But Erik, anything we should we start buttoning this one up?
Yeah, I think this was good. Rod, thanks so much. Sorry you couldn't be here. We'll catch you next time around. I can't wait to hear the relaunch. If you want to be on the show, you want us to help you improve your podcast, it's pretty painless. We just try and find the things you're doing really well and help you do more of that. You can always find us online at podcastreviewshow.com. All of the details are there. You can appear on the show, and we can talk about you right in front of your face, or you can do like Rod did and just submit it, and Dave and I can go over it. The danger of that is a lot of times we have to guess on things because you're not here to answer the questions of why you did particular things. But either way, we're more than happy to help you improve your show today.
And on the next episode, we're going to be looking at the Bare Arm Show. Now, this is not something about shaving or creams for muscles. It's Bare Arms is BEAR arms show.com. Let me double check on that.
So it's arms of bears then, like grizzlies or something.
Yeah, it's no. It's the guest says, I chose the topic that we cover because I'm a passionate about the Second Amendment rights more than any other topic, and I want to help build a community that will eventually help change firearms laws in New Jersey. So that's kind of specific in terms of he's narrowing down the niche to Jersey.
Yeah.
So if you want to check it out, again, go over to beararmshow.com and send us a note. You can call it in 888-563-3228, and you give us a review of the show. We'll play it on the show for the guest. We could always do that. And again, like Erik said, if you want to be on the show and get your show reviewed, just go over to podcastreviewshow.com. Erik, where can people find you?
You can always find me online at podcasttalentcoach.com. Podcast is there. Worksheets are there. All sorts of helpful tools. It's podcasttalentcoach.com.
And, of course, you can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. Both of us are going to be at New Media Expo, which is right around the corner. That's kind of spooky.
Yeah, it is.
If you are going to be at New Media Expo and you see me in the hallway, please, please, please come and shake my hand and introduce yourself. I always hear people say, oh, I saw you, I didn't want to bug you. No, please, I'm telling you, bug me. Erik wants bugged.
We
would love to meet you and shake your hand. And we'll be back real soon with another episode of the Podcast Review Show.